So for our next feature, we'll be taking a look at a British aid worker who has been captured in Syria. The British independent advocacy group CAGE has called for the immediate release of British aid worker Tauqir Sharif, who was captured by the Syrian opposition group Hayat Tahrir al Sham, commonly referred to as HTS, and he was captured over 2 weeks ago while doing his humanitarian work, and he's not been seen since. So online we have for comment is CAGE Outreach Director Mr. Moazzam Begg. Assalamu alaikum, Mr. Begg. Shukran so much for joining us.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My pleasure.
Lovely stuff. Let's start at the beginning. What are the details around Mr. Sharif? Who is he, for starters? We do know that he's a humanitarian worker. Tell us more a little bit about that. And then what do we know about his arrest?
So, Tauqir Sharif, who's nicknamed Tox, also locally known as Abu Hussam, is a British citizen who has been working in Syria since 2012, which is where I first met him, and I lived with him and his family for a little while before leaving. He remained and has continued to be working on aid projects, and that is building a school that's famous there called Moazzam Begg, Sham, the children of Syria. He's building aid projects, refugee centers. He's built an entire village for orphans and widows, and he's known very locally. He's known for his work, and he's deeply loved. And prior to this, the work that he'd done here before, he'd been on the convoys, the historic land convoys to Gaza. He was on the Mavi Marmara ship, which was the ship that was attacked by the Israeli soldiers and killed unarmed aid workers. So he has a history of working in aid. But in Syria, he's been there for 8 years, living there with his family, and as I said, he's become a household name, not only amongst English-speaking Muslims in Britain, but also in his locality in Syria. Interestingly, just after he got taken into custody by the local Hayat Tahrir al Sham, who controlled the area, people have come out in protests en masse, which is quite unusual for Syrians to do for a non-Syrian. And they've come out, women, children, men, all who are refugees or studying in the schools, and calling for him to be released. So he was taken into custody almost just now more than 2 weeks ago by armed men wearing masks, we believe to be from Hayat Tahrir al Sham. In fact, we have established it there from Hayat Tahrir al Sham. And they are holding him in extrajudicial detention. He's not seen a judge. He's not been given anything legal, not any documentation. His family has not seen any documentation. We believe also that he was physically beaten, both at the point at which he was taken and then later on. And the purpose behind it still remains unclear. There are all sorts of rumors, but the fact is nothing official, no official document that has been signed by any of the HTS leadership or their judges has been presented to him. So that is why we are calling for him to be immediately released, because of the process that he's facing and the lack of charges.
You've also mentioned the HTS group. Tell us a little bit more. You noted that they are in control in the region, but who are they exactly? And how much authority do they have to conduct an arrest like this?
So HTS, Hayat Tahrir al Sham, is a formulation of different groups that emerged out of the various rebel factions. And they are now the dominant group in the region. And HTS leadership is under Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani, who's a local Syrian, and they also have been working with the Turkish government. It's important to remember so now that Idlib region is all that's left from, and everything has been taken back by the regime, and Idlib region is all that is left. And so Turkish intervention has actually helped and protected the rest of this region. And it is HTS that is trying to do those deals with Turkey in order to maintain that, keeping out the rest of the regime, because the amount of civilians being killed by the bombs of the regime has been devastating for that population. So HTS has emerged as the stronger party of all the different parties, and yet there are still other rebel factions that exist within Syria who are also fighting the regime. And we think that the problem that has happened with Tauqir is that in the midst of all of this, distributing aid to one side and to the other side, he's got caught up in the midst of that, and that's really what it's about.
Has there been any communication with the organization from Tauqir or his family?
Yes, so Tauqir has managed to have he's managed to have a phone call with his mother, and I believe his wife has managed to visit him once. Again, it was at an undisclosed location, and it was revealed after that he had been hurt. Let's say there was some scarring to his head, and so forth. So there are negotiations trying to take place at every different level, but we are really trying to put and ask the HTS authorities to release this man, because he's left behind absolutely everything in the UK and given his entire life and dedicated it to the Syrian people. The last thing that they want to be doing is detaining somebody like that. If anything else, he should be getting awards and accolades for his work, not to be penalized like this.
You also mentioned calls from the community, such as the children and people outside of Syria, calling for his release. Has that amounted to anything? Has there been any official communication with the HTS?
Well, officially, no. I mean, this is the problem. There's been no official communication from the HTS at all, including there's no statements by them at all. There are those who are close to HTS or sympathizers, let's say, with HTS that we've spoken to directly, and they are saying let it run its course. But the problem is we don't know what the course is. Nobody knows how long a person can be there detained. Nobody knows what the charges are. Nobody knows when this process will end. And the problem is, it isn't just about Tauqir as a person. It's actually the projects that he's running. Those projects means the orphans, the widows, the internally displaced people who have already become refugees in their own land and have sought refuge and have got some kind of stability where Tauqir has helped to present it for them. Now they themselves are in a precarious situation because there's nobody to administer and run the places where they're in. So his continued detention hurts them, and this cannot be right for an organization that wants to has the mandate to protect the Syrian people.
Is this the first time the Cage organization has dealt with something like this? Or, for example, looking at other cases like this, what is the usual procedure when somebody is detained without charge?
Well, yes, I mean, unfortunately, what we've seen in Syria, because it's not really a proper government, we understand that. So normally what we do if somebody is detained without charge, of course, the whole point is that you're acting outside of law. The government, whichever it is, the holding authority, is acting outside of the rule of law, because if you detain somebody without charge, without knowing what reason it is that they're in prison for, that's an excess of authority wherever you are, whether it's the United States government or whether it's a small organization like Hayat Tahrir al Sham. The principle is the same. So we try our best wherever we can. With Tauqir Sharif in particular, because I know him personally, and also he's been a client of Cage, because separately, I mean, and the irony, it's great irony, that the British government removed his nationality. They revoked it a couple of years ago, ironically based on the fact that he's in Syria and may be connected to armed groups, one of which would have been Hayat Tahrir al Sham. So the reason why his nationality has been revoked is because he's operating in a region where Hayat Tahrir al Sham is in charge, and Hayat Tahrir al Sham has actually put him into prison. So, particularly in Tauqir's case, we said that the British government has removed his rights, made him essentially stateless. He can't leave from that place now, neither can his children nor his wife. So he's in a very bad situation. He has nobody representing him. And if anything, the communities there should have come to his assistance, and not to kind of stick the boot in while he's suffering even more.
And you have mentioned that there's been no ransom or anything like that for his demand. Absolutely nothing.
No, I mean, of course, the HTS authorities are not. They don't present themselves as if they are a group of bandits. They do apply law and order in their region in the way that they administer it. But the problem we're saying is that in his case, he's been dealt with without any legal process. It's almost as the same as I've said. The United States of America is a country of law and order, yet it kidnapped people like me and put us into places like Guantanamo outside of the rule of law. So the principle is the same, that if you are a people that have laws, apply them. If you don't apply them, then you're acting extrajudicially outside of the law.
Is there an international call you'd like to make, considering the dire situation of the people who he had worked with, is currently in?
The call that I'm making, and I have made through both private and public channels, is to the HTS leadership, is that Nobody here is calling for. Nobody's trying to harm you as an organization. Nobody's your enemy here. We understand the role you're playing in trying to defend what is the last part of the free Syrian people. But what we're asking for is the implementation of justice, because if you don't implement justice amongst your own people, then you lose. There's no difference between you and any other armed group of thugs. And so we hold you to a standard that's better than that, especially because you're saying you are a legitimate organization that is in charge of several million people. And so administering justice is going to be the litmus test. That is which decides whether your legitimacy or not, whether you administer justice or not.
Any last words from your side, Mr. Begg?
No, as far as your listeners are concerned, we just hope that you all join the campaign, the call. It's a simple call, and it's one of, if he's committed any crimes, then let those crimes be presented in the court of law, and let a judge adjudicate over that. In the absence of that, and it is the absence of that at the moment, we call for his immediate release and for his return to his family. And please just echo this sentiment that not only is Tauq's, his family is suffering, the aid projects, the people that he's come to help, they are suffering, and we need to stop that.
Inshallah. We send out our du'as, and we hope everything of the best for yourself and the organization, inshallah. Cage Outreach Director, Mr. Moazzam Begg, shukran so much for joining us.
Jazakallah khair, barakallah feekum to you and to your listeners.
Shukran, brother. And that was, once again, Cage Outreach Director, Mr. Moazzam Begg, talking to us.